You're watching Notepad. I'm your host Ibrahim Sani. If you haven't heard of Carsome, you really should, because it's a company that discusses or does online trading of cars. If you have something that you want to sell, go to Carsome, you get it sold. And that is a business that is tried and tested, because Carsome, the last time they came on my show was 2 years ago. Since then, they've raised a couple of millions actually, from Series A, B to C. Very recently, they raised Series C, 50 million US dollars, and that translates to more than 200 million ringgit. And since then, they have had a very interesting period. Like most businesses in the country, their business actually stalled because of COVID-19 and the MCO. But since then, right now in July, they have made an announcement that they have made a V-shaped recovery, to a point where some of their monthly, month-on-month figures actually quadrupled, to a point where it was very similar to last year's numbers. So to discuss this and more, I have with me in the studio Carsome's co-founder as well as Group CEO Eric Chang. Eric, let's talk a little bit about the business during the past few months of Carsome. How's it been?
Right. I think first of all, very happy to be here. And I think last year was, let's dial back to last year, right? Last year we did pretty well in terms of like the whole year round. We transacted 40,000 cars, and there's about 1.2 billion ringgit worth of car transacted on the platform. So coming into this year, we are positioned well in terms of like getting another best year yet, to a target of 3x of last year. Right, and of course, as we continue to grow the business, everything goes well in a month leading towards March, and what happened over there. There's a very significant event that happens, and as we operate in the region, we basically gone through a various degree of lockdown, from Malaysia to Indonesia, Thailand, Singapore, and the rest. So we had to basically shut the office and get everyone to work from home. And for those inspection centers that we do checking on cars, we continue to run on the basis that we practice safe social distancing, to adhering to the latest health guideline. And I think those are the things that we do. We have very limited movement in the entire period of lockdown. To that end also, I think we see a lot of initiative being poured into looking at the business and how do we come back from the lockdown.
So how do you come back from the lockdown? Because that V-shaped recovery, I'm assuming it's the same for Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, and Singapore.
Yeah.
So how did you come back?
So it wasn't easy, right? And I think it comes down to a few factors. So I think firstly, externally, the entire market now is coming with a pent-up demand, especially when you look at post-lockdown. Most people are now trying to shy away from public transport, right? So we did a survey, which about 76% of the people now are less inclined to use ride-hailing or public transport, where they want to be on their own car and due to safety reason. So that actually caused the industry, the market for car especially, to come up right after that. Right. I think secondly also because internally we have done multiple measures and trying to respond to the lockdown by really investing areas that deem as able to contribute to long-term success. So areas like technology or the product within the business that entire ecosystem partners within the used car market will plug into us, and also upskilling our people internally from our workforce, which in that we also launched something that we call Carsome Academy, to basically do a more structured training across the board with our people.
One thing that I noticed is that the last time you came to the show was 2018. Much to our surprise, because we both checked our logs on when you came on the show. But in 2019, I sold my car on Carsome platform after speaking to you actually, and it was a Jalopy. It was sold for a very, very low price, and I was actually surprised that you guys even took my car. What do you do to my car? I mean, like, do you sell it for parts or what? I mean, I can't imagine somebody buying my ex-car just like that, because it's really, really in a bad shape.
Got it. I think that's the whole reason why we've been around, right? So we've been around for 5 years, and we've been positioned as a disruptive model towards the used car market, because to begin with, the market itself is largely unorganized, right? So the supply and demand is actually not being bridged in a right way, where you do not have a standard of procedure when it comes to buying and selling cars, right? Especially for used cars. So what we did was to really come in to standardize the process, and that includes like the inspection, to having a platform that connects all the buyers, which the used car dealer within the country, to look for inventory that they would want to purchase, right? And in that process, of course, one of your car became one of those inventory that made it up on the platform itself, all right? And there's always a buyer in that to any type of cars, right? From 10 years old car to maybe a 1 or 2 year or a new used car, right? So I think that's how we're trying to implement or instill the efficiencies within the process to bridge the supply and demand. And in between that also, we standardize the assets across so that the buyers are able to purchase your car from anywhere they are.
Okay, let's talk about the different markets right now you're operating in Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, Singapore. Is there any similarity between all these markets in terms of this so-called unorganized used car market?
Yeah, it's largely the same. You find a lot of similarity in terms of like how fragmented it is. It's an extremely big market, and yet you don't see any significant players within the market doing something that are able to claim it as large enough size, right? So even for us right now, being deemed as the largest trading platform for used car in the region, we are at about only 1% of the market. So there's a large space for us to actually go into to create or basically accelerate the whole digitalization across the entire market with the buyers and sellers.
So when somebody starts a startup, everybody talks about how large a market could possibly be, the what I call addressable or target market, whatever jargon that you guys use at Silicon Valley. That conversation is actually quite realistic here because that pent-up demand that you touched upon based on your Carsome consumer survey, which we'll be discussing at length later on after the break. But I want to focus a little bit more on that pent-up demand conversation that you raised.
Sure.
It seems like there is a demand, and that demand was halted for COVID from March, perhaps even Singapore slightly earlier, April, May, and then when we talked about the recovery MCO, at least in Malaysia, and then of course in Thailand, Singapore, slowly coming back.
Yep.
It's like out of the floodgates. That means that this pent-up demand is truly a significant, real demand that talks about people wanting to buy second-hand cars. Mm-hmm. Is that going to sustain itself, or is just people just shying away from public transportation right now, or is it a sustainable thing towards the end of the year and perhaps even next year?
Yeah, I think there's two factors that we're seeing. The market is on a very positive trend. I think firstly, like you say, the pent-up demand came when, during the lockdown, literally you cannot purchase any car or trade any car, right? So those demand flows into the opening of the country, which in May, in June, we started to see the numbers pick up very quickly. And I think that's also another endorsement towards, like, in any crisis, used car market has been very resilient towards how the recovery or towards the sustainability of the entire market, right? So I think that's one of the most factors that we saw, that the pent-up demand actually came, and it's largely to stay due to the second factor, where I think overall the market itself is trying to digitalize as much as possible, right? When people are trying to shy away from public transport, at the same time, they also want to go for something that is more affordable, right? And I think people are now trying to stay very frugal in terms of how they spend their money. And in that process, they also want to be able to limit their physical activities. Like, for example, you see any verticals that touch upon e-commerce trend, they are also going into acceleration in terms of how their pickup, their growth, and their recovery, right? So I think in turn also, because we've been a big believer in terms of digitalization, we build all our core capabilities around that, and I think that also benefits us in many ways. And with a market that is growing, with the demand also staying pretty much the same, I think we also benefit from the fact that digitalization is coming closer and closer to people and the market around us.
So am I sensing another round of investments coming in?
I think at the same time we are thinking about it. I think more importantly is we have big plans in terms of how we look at the next extension towards the business. As you know, how you came across Carsome is you want to sell a car, right? So I think digitalization...
Actually, I spoke to you. That's how I came about to knowing Carsome.
Exactly. So and there's actually many people who wants to at the same time hey, can you help me buy a car, right? I want to be able to buy a quality used car in the market, and I think it's hard to come by, given shopping for used car is one of the worst experience in the world.
Absolutely,
likely.
there's a high sense of distrust, you name it, right?
Exactly, yeah. So I think that's where we want to come in to basically change the perception, right? It can be professional, it can be trusted, you can buy with confidence and actually enjoy the buying experience, just like how we have done it with the selling side of things, right? So, and I believe that with the upcoming plans that we have right now for the rest of the year, there's one big part of going full cycle of entire trading from selling to buying, able to accommodate anyone who wants to trade a car or buy a car as well.
But you've raised close to 100 million US dollars. I mean, really, that's quite sizable.
Yeah,
So where are you going to be pumping the cash into?
So there's a few areas that we're looking at. So I think right now, even the company last year we have achieved profitability in Malaysia.
No way.
Yeah, so
Really?
Malaysia has already achieved profitability since end of last year. And actually this year, prior to the pandemic, we were on track to continue on that trend to be
Another profitable
achieving
year.
good profitability. Yeah. So I think with the recent recovery, we are seeing that to continue happen. So we're still on track. So within this year, we're still looking at the group profitabilities. But in terms of like how we have raised fund and where we are investing the areas, right? I think we are basically doing as per the previous plan, right? To be heavily investing in our core capabilities. And that's namely our technology and our product, right? So to come up with a full suite of product range that cater for not just consumers, but at the same time the ecosystem partners like the used car dealers, the new car dealership who provide trade-ins, and at the same time ancillaries like financing, insurance, warranty. So these are the things that we are right now already on the plate. There are some is upcoming in upcoming quarters, right?
So, some of the key things about your business is that it's a high-touch, personalized, not personalized, high-touch, face-to-face human interface business. When I sold my car, I put my car up. Somebody called me up very fast, very quick. They practically rushed me to bring my jalebi to one of the Carsome outlets, which I did. I put it up in the afternoon. Towards the evening, somebody called. Next day, my car's inside one of your outlets. Everything was done. I had my breakfast. 12 o'clock, I got my cash. It was so brilliant, right? And I don't know whether this is overgeneralizing it. I doubt you people know me when I put my name there, but I can perhaps extrapolate this to some of the conversations that I had with my friends who have been on the platform. Now, I don't know whether that's like really good, excellent customer service, or that was when you guys were young and early on and things are different now. But how do you sustain that to keep it that intense, kind of high-touch business moving forward when you are going to grow so extensively right now?
Yeah, so I think that's where the core competencies come in, right? Because as we invest into technology, invest into our supply chain capability, the goal for here, or the objective over here, is to always deliver a good consumer experience, right? So like you as a customers, what we have delivered is a pleasant one. We actually felt it can be better, right? So in that process, many things plays a role. Technology plays a role in the sense where how quickly we can turn around, how quickly we can get the informations and react to you and provide you a very accurate informations. And on the other hand, the supply chain side, we are able to cater for things like customer service calling you, to sending the cars logistically to delivery to a dealer, right? So that they receive their inventory from the first touch point, right? So I think a lot of this kind of go in accordance to how we map out the plan, because we've been growing about 3x growth almost every other year, right? And we plan to do so for this year. So, and as you grow, this will become a scaling problem, although it's a good problem to have, but it's also important to tackle so that we don't actually miss any part that people see us as Carsome is not exactly the way they picture it. Yeah.
When you said you're going to use technology to improve efficiency, exactly how is technology going to help that?
So multiple things, right? So I think we have the foundation of a range of products that cater for any needs. So for example, like when we check your car, there's an inspection applications that are done through the mobile phones. And through that, usually inspection, a physical one would take like 45 minutes. But to do that, and at the same time upload all the informations and picture taking, including the captions, we can actually do it at around about 30 minutes right now, right? So how do we create a seamless process? You first need to gather enough data, right, at the same time, so that you have a better decision making in terms of what would be the areas that we can actually cut down, what would be the area that spend a lot of time, and how do we address it by having an application that can reduce the time spent over there, but yet remain the quality, right, of the accuracy, right? So all these things, the product itself plays a role, and it requires like a good data sets to help you understand whether you need to reduce that or do this first and prioritize in certain areas that you need more time.
Okay, Eric, we'll go for a short break before we continue on with that Carsome consumer survey that they've done a few months back. Don't go anywhere. Thanks for staying on with us. I have with me Eric Cheng of Carsome. We were talking about the Carsome consumer survey. It says here that you conducted it in April this year, and some of the data that I can share at least would be quite interesting. 76% decrease in the usage of ride-sharing services. So for every 4 people you meet, three of them don't want to use ride-share. Grab lah, huh? And then 34% of Malaysians, 43% of Indonesians, 25% of Thais surveyed plan to sell their cars within the next 12 months. I am not in that particular statistics, but yes, there seems to be at least 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 of the population in Malaysia, Thailand and Indonesia wants to sell their car. Some of them cite the reasons of wanting to get rid of their old cars. Others are citing they want to have more cash on hand. These are very unearthing, very interesting things that you have unearthed in this survey. Knowing these kind of information, how are you going to position yourself in the next few months when countries are slowly opening up, barring any new 3rd wave, 4th wave, 5th wave, 2nd wave, whatever, hitting all these other countries?
Yeah, so I think, again, like we mentioned about the market, right? So it's gradually coming up, and we are seeing the demand from people intend to go for a purchase, right? So, and when it comes to purchase, there's always a new car and a used car, right? So people would want to have a car of their own. So a new car, generally speaking, is a bit more expensive compared to used car, right? So I think as a market itself, we feel on the short to mid-term, it will continue to sustain, not just because of the pent-up demand, but because also of the price point, the advantages like lower depreciation and so on, right, that will come with a used car purchase, right? So, and I think based on that, we are also seeing some other markets like China, which kind of reopens much quicker than us. The market for cars generally for new and used are picking up very quickly, right? So that in turn also gives us the kind of confidence that when we do reopen, the similar situation will happen over here within Southeast Asia, and that in fact did happen in the recent months. So I think the other thing is, of course, in Southeast Asia, across all the governments, they implemented like a sales tax exemption to generate the economy and revitalize most of the new car demand, right? And with every new car demand also, there will be largely a trade-in that attached to it. So I think based on the stats that we have saw so far, about 70% of the cars, a buyer, they would come with a trade-in request, right? So we also see that those inventory would gradually flow into the used car market, which in turn also help beef up the inventory size for used car and then cater for the demand. So I think the market is in a very good cycle, a healthy cycle in terms of buying and selling, supply and demand. And I think for us as a platform is we want to increase the liquidity of this entire market by speed up the entire process of the trading.
There's also the conversation of, in light of both government regulations as well as increasing liquidity, a lot of governments around the region, in fact around the world actually, is reducing interest rates like nobody's business. Like we have had the 4th cut this year, 1.75 right now. It's one of the lowest that we've seen, ever. And that perhaps would spur some interest from the consumers to take up loans to buy new cars. For whatever reason, they feel that this would be a better investments for them. Do you think that this is going to impact on your business? Because, well, it's so cheap right now, interest rates, they are better just buy a new car. How does that impact your business?
Again, I think that is a very positive thing that we have heard, right, from the government, because I think prior to this, we see really strong demand and we see people or traders are going in the market actively to do buying and selling, right? So one of the thing that attached to it is the financing, right? So, and I think there was a concern where financing might not be approved because banks are tightening up and all. And I think this served as one of the sign of government is supporting the entire automotive economy And I believe even with more new cars, there will be more used car. So we definitely, for any used car population to appear, you first need to have a new car being traded. So I feel having that actually it increases the number of young new cars, like 1 to 3 years old used car in the market, and in turn also increase the quality of used car that we can buy within the country itself.
All right, let's talk about the verticals within the auto industry. Some of the competitors outside of your trading business, what they're doing is short-term loan of vehicles. You can rent a car for like a month or 3 months. There's also day rent, that kind of stuff. And while this might still talk about that whole ride-sharing business per se, but not quite, is that one of those areas that you're trying to get yourself into, that kind of market?
I think we are very much still on the consumer experience when it comes to trading a car. I think we are looking at a big opportunity there in terms of our market itself. Even between the buying and selling, we are talking about like $40 billion with about 4.5 million cars traded almost every other year, right? So that is definitely be growing at a pace of 5 to 10% in the next 1 or 2 years or so. So in terms of like the car rental business, I feel is something that will actually help the entire industry to come up, because a lot of those platforms that you mentioned, they are also very big believer in terms of digitalization, right? Getting a car at ease in a few touch, right? So, and I feel that educate the general public in terms of how things can be done a lot more digitally, more efficiently. As for us, is we see the used car market as a really huge market, right? So, and I think there's plenty of room for us to grow. So, as of right now, in terms of the planning wise and all, we are very, very much revolved around the buying and selling of a used car.
All right. Let's take a step back from the business per se. Let's talk about your company when you were operating during the MCO in all the countries. This is just me trying to understand how you guys work. During the MCO, how did you do your work? Is it like a lot of teams working out of a lot of places, or you just literally took a 3-month vacation, all of you?
Yeah, so I wish I can take the vacation, but I think we work even harder during that 3 months, to be honest, right? Especially when all 3 countries or all 4 countries that we operate in enter a lockdown in very similar but different periods, right?
Yeah.
So and we kind of have to basically react to it on a day-to-day basis. As you know, also a lot of the lockdown has been extended to the months later as compared to when they first announced, right? So I think, as I mentioned before, in terms of the core competencies, that's where we heavily invested when it comes to during the lockdown period. So most of us work from home because we're not allowed to open most of our inspection centers, our retail. So what we did is to first having a very strong revisit in terms of how we speed up the entire development pipeline for product and tech. So that's one thing that we did already. The second thing was to really increase the strength of our supply chain capability, so that when we come up from the market, we can actually cater for recovery as quickly as possible. So that includes the Carsome Academy, upskilling our workforce, doing structured training to all our people, and I think that's one of the second one. And the last one would be our culture, right? So I think that's something that a lot of things we believe contributed to our recent success, namely because if you look at during the lockdown, a lot of people are in very uncertain times, and they're not sure how the company will react to it. They're not sure about whether the business will even stay afloat, right? So I think what we did is we have communicate to all our staff almost constantly on a daily basis to let them know the situation, what we are doing as a company, how do we respond to it, and what do we do in the next few days to even the next few weeks. And I think in that we also host like a regional town hall across all countries with about 800 people in one conference call. So that helps to basically stabilize the people within the organization.
And so trying to manage the anxiety that you talk about.
Exactly, right. So people get the comfort and the confidence that what we are going to do, the visibility as well, so that when we do come out as well, I think we have a few plannings that we have done, and a lot of times within the work from home time that we actually use that slots to kind of create the planning that we're going to eventually launch during the post-lockdown.
See, this is the thing that I want to get at, and we don't have much time left. But you're not the only company that does that, right? When you use the MCO to take a step back and breathe and plan and strategize and think about what you're going to do in the near term. Mm-hmm. Do you feel that the MCO actually brought about new sets of paradigm shifts for you guys, because you literally had nothing to do but just sit down and think about what you need to do next?
Yeah, I think it did because at the same time we have like calls within the leadership team and with the people as well to gain more feedback that during business as usual you most likely wouldn't be able to get.
You can't because
Yeah.
you're putting out fires, you're trying to build new fires for
Exactly.
other people, and
Yeah.
you're just rushing, right?
So yeah, you have slightly more time in terms of thinking about how you want to move the business post that, and I think that reflects very well, right? Because of two things, we've seen that post lockdown, there's a change of landscape in terms of how people think about all the markets right now. So and being as a part of a digital business, you know, it actually helps in accelerating not just the market but also our business recovery at the same time, right? So that has been something that we identified during the lockdown period, and we wanted to accelerate as fast as possible so that we can benefit from it, right? And then secondly, also of course, of all these core competencies that we have built, so that when we do emerge out of this, we are not, you know, hold back by any issues that we see before the lockdown, right? So, and I think that if we look at, I think it's also hard to get the visibility of how our industry peers are performing.
Are you guys ready for a possibility of a second lockdown in the various countries? Because that is a reality now. We've had a lot of information coming in from the World Health Organization. All the other people are saying that the antibody doesn't last that long, and then people are now loosening up on wearing masks, things like that, right?
Yeah.
Are you guys ready for that?
Exactly right. I think no one will be ready for it, and I think we are doing it very cautiously to make sure that, you know, when this happens, what are the kind of plannings that we have to basically reduce the risk, our exposure as much as possible. I think the way we think about it is ultimately this would stay on for a while, at least for the fear, right? You know, the fear of people that pandemic would be around for a while. And I think for us is we position ourselves in that situation, how do we react to it? And I think as much as we can, we formulate scenarios that we would anticipate, and from there we try to react as we go.
All right, thank you very much. That was the co-founder and group CEO of Carsome, Eric Chang. If you've missed any part of this interview, just head on to astro.com, look for Notepad over there. You can also download this interview on your mobile devices. Just download the Astro AWANI app wherever you get the application. Until then, thanks very much for watching, and goodbye.